Okay, ladies and gentlemen, start your engines. Germination. Stores have the little trays with lids. Great if you have the money. If you don't have the money, pots with the saran wrap to keep the moisture even until they emerge. Remove the plastic. Can take days, even weeks, especially with some of the herbs, to see that, so be patient. You can soak the larger seeds. Most people recommend this. I have great success not doing it. They emerge easily. Simple, damp, wet paper towel, beans, corn, squash, watermelon, and put it in a plastic bag. You have to check it every day to see when they start to erupt. This is also a great way to ensure that you have a germination rate of 80% or higher, and also so that you don't have to go back through and thin your plants out. We're going to get into spacing and sowing depth. Great for germination, and also can be used as pots if you don't even have money for pots, are these plastic trays. Spinach, lettuce mix, all this kind of stuff comes in these, and you can poke holes in the bottom for drainage, fill it with soil, and germinate or even grow. Now, the other thing that I love to do with these is direct sow and use them as little mini greenhouses. And you just have to weight it down, bury it, wet your soil down, plop your seeds in there, and boom, retains the moisture and the heat. You could get an early start. Also, things that are just around the house, like, this is for the cakes and pastries. So utilize everything that you have laying around the house. Also, I realize that a lot of preppers have been doing this for quite some time and got into the habit of storing water in old plastic containers, but the problem with that is they eventually start to leak. They're very useful at that point. You can cut it here and use it for a pot, or you can leave it whole, put a whole bunch of holes all over this, and bury it. For people that don't have a watering system or water conservation comes into heavy-duty seriousness, deep watering system. You just bury it up to here and then put your water in there, and no evaporation, gets right to the roots. All right, next on the list is planting depth. Now, this is common sense and spacing. If you have larger plants, they are going to need to be, they're usually the larger seeds, so they're going to need to go deeper, usually about an inch, inch and a half for some of these varieties. The book will tell you all about that, but if you don't have money for the book, just use your common sense. If the plant gets large, they need to be spaced. And if you have really small seeds, they just get dusted when you're sowing them, whether it be direct sow or in the pots. Just lightly cover with the soil for the germination. Now, direct sow versus transplant. Transplant, you get a much earlier start. Some varieties grow very quickly, or they just don't like to be touched and have their roots disturbed. Watermelon is one such plant, but I've had great success, and what I do is I make sure that all of the transplants get watered thoroughly before the transplant, because they will show fatigue for the next day or two depending on the temperatures. So if they get a really good drink before you transplant them, and I do this mostly with the compost tea, then they are going to handle the transplant. Sometimes they don't even realize that it's happened to them. So beans, we don't recommend transplanting beans because they're super fast growers. Direct sow for those. I prefer bush beans, so I don't have to worry about staking. Of course, corn, wheat, any of that type of grains, direct sow those. And let's see. Tobacco, very easy. Grows in all 50 states, historically one of the largest cash crops on the nation. Great thing to get into because people are going to want to have this. So whether it be the seed or the tobacco, great barter item. They aren't easily recognizable, some of my varieties, and if it's going to seed, as soon as the seeds emerge, you just let it go. But if you want to harvest it for the tobacco leaves, like the basil, pinch those flower buds off and it's going to force the plants into production of more leaves. Like the basil, this is going to increase your job of pinching off of all of the new sprouts as they start to bud. There's a terminology called hardening off, and this is when the plant is started indoors, greenhouse, or your windowsill, whatever, and it has to acclimate to the outdoor conditions. So when they are newly emerged, you take them outdoors and give them a little bit of sun, or if you can, open up the windows. It depends on your setup. You know, you might have a little greenhouse where you could plop windows down and very elaborate, but they have to be eased out. And this is a must. Even tomato plants, as they are emerging, they are going to be much stronger plants as they have conditioned themselves to dealing with wind and heavier rains. So some plants, when you water them, you shouldn't get them wet, especially if moisture, mold is a problem in your area. You want to water roots. Some plants like to have the whole plant watered, and like I said, the rain conditions them to be stronger. Tomatoes typically don't like to be touched too much, and this is for the newbies. They're called suckers, where the tomato vines branch off. There's going to be a little sprout in there, and you pinch it. Try to get them when they're really little. They're suckers. They will never produce, and they're just drawing energy, nutrients, resources away from your tomato production. Problems with tomatoes, blight and all that, and it takes certain temperatures for the flowers to pollinate. They like warm, but if it gets too warm, then the pollination doesn't take place and you won't have production, or it drops the fruit. Staking traditionally is done with wood stakes to support the tomato. Tomatoes, when left on the ground, this is great to know for pirate gardening. They are unbelievable vines. They will just take over, and everywhere the vine, not everywhere, but a lot of places where the vine makes contact with soil, it'll grow more roots. So therefore it could get water from different places. So back to the staking. That's the wood stake that you put in to tie your tomato plants up to conserve on space and make it easier to walk around the garden for weeding and whatnot. You want these stakes to last a really long time. So when you're pounding them in the ground, put like a wood shim. Don't directly pound on the stakes with your hammer or mallet. Heavier the mallet, the quicker these stakes are going to go into the ground. And I've also used rebarb, concrete reinforcement rods. Has iron content, doesn't hurt the plants, and they last a lot longer than wood. This goes to making selections on plants if you are in an extreme situation where water conservation is key to your survival and your food source survival. You're picking the highest yield plants, and my favorites, I know I'm gonna try to the very last drops to keep these plants going, are squash plants. Very heavy producers and packed with vitamins. Also, kohlrabi, even though it's a one-shot deal because it produces a bulb, it's a densely packed cabbage. Out of all of the cole crop family, it has the most vitamin content, and it also stores for a very long time. Beans are extremely prolific producers. They are versatile because, of course, you could eat them fresh. You can eat the pod, and you dry them, and then you have long-term food storage. And the more you pick, the more this plant becomes frantic to reproduce. So it's just spitting beans out left and right. Tomatoes are on my top pick list. Corn and wheat. Of course, corn for its versatility. Eat fresh. Animal feed. Cornmeal. Freeze corn, dry corn, all of that. Potatoes are, they won't require much water, and you're going, if your soil conditions are rich and you've loosened the soil, they are going to be heavy producers, both potatoes and sweet potatoes. So it's a lot of bang for your buck there. So I'm going to try my very best to keep my medicinal herbs going. Most of them are pretty tough. They thrive in poor soil conditions, and the plus to the healing herbs is that you can plant them in shade of other plants, and even in the category of pirate gardening. I don't know how much time I've just gone through. I will make any additional notes that I could think of, because lots of stuff comes up after I do these, in the little annotations. I think I've covered a pretty good amount of basics for germination, transplanting, and that. Oh, maybe I'll get this. If you have ordered a seed collection through me, these are my top picks for what I would go online and get in addition to this. Of course, fruits, spinach, regular varieties of spinach. I happen to like the old French heirlooms, but New Zealand, because New Zealand isn't a true spinach, and it handles the heat a lot better. Spinach is going to bolt in the warmer climates. It's, you plant it very early spring, and so the New Zealand is a good green in the interim between your leafy green spring and fall crop. More varieties of corn. They need a lot of genetic diversity, and that's one of the things that's high GMO at this point. So the more corn varieties that we could save, the better. Shalou is an Egyptian wheat. It's my pick to have wheat on hand because this one, of course, being from Egypt, is extremely drought tolerant. Wheat and oats. Swiss chard, great green. Some of these are multitaskers because the chickens really love it, and after they eat it, it will sprout back. Beets, bush beans. In the care packages, most of the squash, I think almost all of the squash, depending on when you confirmed with me, are of the Pepo and Maxima. There are 4 families. So in addition to the squash, look for the mixta, and I don't even know if I say this right, it's the muscata. And there are 4 families. They won't cross-pollinate. You'll get a lot more squash. So pick a couple from each of those. More herbs depending on your family's health conditions and, common ailments. Like thyme is a must because it's great to season, but it also is great for respiratory. I'll get into that later. Kohlrabi, like I'd mentioned. Cauliflower, broccoli, kales, onions, carrots, leek, radish. For me, a must-have is the lemon balm. It's in the mint family. It's very versatile, and it's also one of the strongest natural antidepressants. So I would also add oregano and marjoram. Must, must, must. Select wildflowers for your area, and if you think that you're going to experience climatic changes, order wildflowers from all of the different regions. Have those on hand. The insects love it. You will love it. They nourish the soul. They nourish the insects. All right, I'll be back with more. Thanks for your time. Be well.